Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed, your host and relationship coach. A very, very warm welcome from all of us here on British Muslim TV to all of you, whether you're streaming live on Sky Channel 752, Facebook or Twitter. We love to hear your voices and you can definitely participate in the actual episode tonight throughout the actual hour. Make sure you do by calling in directly to the studio on 01924 But please do ask the bill payer's permission as standard network rates do apply. You can also message us for free on our WhatsApp service, and that number is 07585835150. And I'll be reading out your questions, comments, queries for my guest tonight, and it could be, anonymous, and I'm happy to do so. So I look forward to hearing some of your voices. Now, we're going to be discussing breaking dysfunctional family cycles, a really important aspect for us to have really good, great relationships. And with me today, all the way from Perth, Australia, we have our lovely guest who is joining us tonight. Please welcome her. We have Khadija Al Kador. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Fahima. Very happy to be here.
I am really happy to have you. And I know it's like, what, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and you're giving us your time.
Yes.
I really
Yep,
appreciate that.
it's
The dedication.
4:30 down under.
Wow, thank you so much. 4:30 a.m., everyone, remember, in Australia. So I just want to say again, thank you so much for your time and for being with us today. It's really important that we discuss this topic. And I think what's really important is that you really work hard for your clients in order to help them break this kind of cycle so that they can actually manage really great relationships. Now, before we go into the topic, tell us a little bit about yourself and your passion and, how did this all start?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So my name is Khadija Al. I am a parenting mentor and I empower Muslim mothers to break those dysfunctional family cycles and come from a place of surviving to thriving and just really reclaim themselves and their own emotional healthy self for thriving homes, inshallah. It all started from my own childhood. So I grew up in a very dysfunctional home. There was emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and just having that upbringing when, there's a lot of chaos and things are not healthy in many ways. When I was 12 years old, an incident happened that really just absolutely changed my life. And in that, what happened, I remember being only 14 at the time and really making a decision that I wanted to go into some kind of work where children would be protected from abuse. My parents ended up divorcing when I was 16, and my father had a lot of psychological and mental health issues as well. And I went straight into, unfortunately, I went straight into a relationship that was also dysfunctional. In that marriage, I started studying my degree, which was in like child development specialist, but in particular, it was to do with child protection because I had a big passion that children in our Muslim homes should grow up in healthy, thriving, emotionally healthy homes, especially. And when I had finished the degree, it was interesting because I realized that I wanted to do the preventative work, which is the foundation to help parents to be better parents, to thrive, to be more emotionally self-regulated, more healthy. And I had 4 boys in that first marriage. I exited that first marriage. It was a lot of emotional abuse. And I went really deep into my own healing journey from my childhood and previous marriage from about 2014. And then been on that journey for maybe quite a long time, alhamdulillah. And in 2015, I started doing workshops for Muslim mothers, just really helping them to understand the based foundation of raising children. And when they understood their children better, they were able to react to their children better. So that was the area that I really enjoyed. And then I continued my growth journey started to learn more and more and more. I started mentoring more mothers, and I have 5 sons, and so I'm really passionate also about raising boys, emotionally healthy, responsible boys. So it's always been another area that I find that in our ummah there's a lot of challenge around. So I feel like now it's my birthday today, and it's
Happy
like been many
birthday.
years since that childhood. Pardon?
Happy birthday to you. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
even coming on. I didn't realize. Thank you so much for sharing that. I just want to say firstly, I really do appreciate you finding us, a safe space to discuss this. It is not easy to open up about your personal story and especially to do it publicly. So again, I thank you. And also some of you may be triggered by what we're going to speak today. And if you have got any issues, please do contact BritishMuslim.tv/support for any further sort of assistance and guidance. But we are talking today because it's something that is so prevalent and sometimes we don't realize. And honestly, Khadija, you're such an inspiration. And the fact that you've gone through what you've gone through, and a lot of people go through what they go through and not realizing for many years, and raising family as well, it's not easy. And not just doing that by improving yourself, but actually now helping so many other people, which is amazing. And as much as you talk about
Yeah.
helping mothers, I'm sure that if there are any male figures watching as well, at the end of the day, relationships are partnership. So at the end of the day, it will help,
Yeah.
but all, both genders. So when we
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
about functional family cycle and breaking it,
Yeah.
what does breaking a behavior cycle mean? Because at the end of the day, a lot of us don't even understand that. We won't know what that means, how to break it in order to sort of like, give it some definition maybe so we can recognize it.
So breaking a cycle, you hear that a lot. They say like break the cycle or break an intergenerational cycle. So
Yeah.
to make it clearly, generation to generation, we pass on behaviors and patterns of behaviors and even thoughts and beliefs about certain things. And we subconsciously, especially absorb that in our childhood, particularly in the first 7 years of life as the brain is developing. So when we talk about a cycle, I mean a pattern of behavior. It's usually a belief system or behavior that you is not helping you. It's not serving you. It may be unhealthy in some way. It may be destructive in some way. So it's about breaking that cycle. And I always think about it, it's like you're stopping the pain with you and you're not passing that on to your children and then to your grandchildren. And a lot of the time it's about surrendering old beliefs. A lot of people don't understand that behavior is the outcome of the way that they believe, what they believe, the memories that they have, subconsciously what they've absorbed about certain things, the stories, how they perceive themselves. Sometimes it's breaking the cycle of how they speak to themselves and how they interact with themselves, because their perception of themselves may be not very healthy because of their childhood upbringing. And it's allowing yourself to then have the possibility to see yourself from a different lens. And the lens is coming back to that natural fitra state that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us in, which is, when that state is like a beautiful, clean state. Allah created us in this resilient, beautiful, joyful, peaceful state before we started absorbing the hurts and wounds and pains of the people around us and, their stories and that. And just through the lens that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees the potential for you. So trauma, when you're born for any kind of childhood trauma, it teaches you to survive, and it teaches you to have behavior patterns or reactions or habits that may not be healthy for you. And so a lot of the time when I work, especially with mothers, because they get triggered when they're dealing with their children, they want to break those habits. They want to understand why they're acting in that way, because a lot of the time they don't understand why they're acting in certain behavior patterns that are not very healthy.
Could you give us some examples of some of these patterns of behavior? Because a lot of the times, even if you've gone through family trauma, and some of it is quite noticeable and extreme in sort of cases, but others are not. So the real subtle ones, could you maybe like highlight a couple of examples so that they can recognize that, this is not correct, and maybe I need to seek something, because not everybody comes from that sort of knowledge.
Yeah, definitely. So your childhood attachment relationship teaches you a lot about how you show up in the beliefs, the messages, the views that you have about yourself, the views that you have about the world. So some of the behaviors that are rooted in childhood, that show up as an adult that may not be healthy is one that's very common is like self-blame and self-criticism. So as an adult, they might be speaking quite negative to themselves. They think they're not good enough. As children, if you grew up in a chaotic home, or you learnt to you weren't always able to speak your truth. It was not safe to do that or to have an opinion. So a lot of time as adults, they find it really difficult to be able to speak their truth. There's a bit of fear around that, and that's rooted in that childhood trauma. Another aspect of childhood trauma that it shows up is like cutting people off or secluding yourself when you're feeling very emotional. And a lot of that can be a belief from childhood that you had to be alone with your emotions. You weren't allowed to show emotions. I work with a lot of women who find it difficult to cry because the messages that they received about them crying are triggered by their children's crying, because there was messages they received from their family that crying wasn't okay. So there's certain things it can be very, very subtle. A perfectionist pattern, a doing pattern, rejection, feeling like you're sometimes like we can be our worst critics. For example, a perfectionist pattern is very rooted in childhood, because sometimes adults feel like, I have to see the perfectionist habit is rooted in not feeling good enough. So it's like, to protect myself from making a mistake, I got to make everyone think and look like I'm perfect. And that protects me from shame, blame, and criticism. So there's certain patterns that we experience. A busy pattern, when people become overproductive, that kind of links their productivity to their worthiness. So to minimize that discomfort, they start acting out in those certain patterns. And sometimes they might give a short-term
given us
solution,
so much
but it's
so
not.
far to begin with, and I hate to cut you off there, but we are going to continue as we are coming into our
No
first
problem.
break. And you've given us so much food for thought already. And as you know, we come into that break, people are going to be taking notes, and inshallah will be joining us afterwards. So please do stay tuned, as we do have so much more to ask you around this. And it's so interesting to sort of unravel how we were brought up, the patterns, the beliefs, and I've got so much more questions for you. And if anybody else does, please do call in. We'd love to hear your comments and also your questions and queries, as we only have Khadija tonight. And inshallah, we'll be back in a few moments. Please don't go away, as we will continue very shortly. See you soon. Take care. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. Having an amazing conversation with my really inspirational guest tonight, Khadija, who is streaming all the way from Perth in Australia, giving us her time at 4:30 a.m. and also on her birthday. But on top of that, really, really motivational. It's really sort of like inspiring to hear your story. And I know that you probably have an amazing sort of clientele, because it's not just coming from a professional point of view. So the way in which you relate and resonate, and vice versa with your clients, can really make it powerful, because this is not something it's learned only. And I think having that added experience makes a huge difference to resolving these kind of patterns of behavior and things like that. Now, when we talk about childhood and the upbringing and the impact of adult relationships, now obviously there's
Yeah.
two parents, and obviously there are different dynamics in the house. Now, say one
Yes.
parent is doing okay and the other one isn't. Now,
Yes.
the caregiver of one in particular that will have that impact, or if one is slightly off, does that still make a difference, or should it not matter, as long as, for example, the mom's okay, or the mom's not okay and the dad's okay, and he's taking control of the children and being that forefront to them? How does that work? I mean, does both parents have to do that self-development, or can it be where children are also quite resilient and they can see both sides of it and they can come out okay? What's your thoughts on that?
Excellent question, Fahima. So all the research, all the studies, and I would say even I'm a product of that, is if you have one caregiver or one parent or one particular, because some children have exposure to a grandmother or a teacher, if they had someone in their childhood that kind of really believed in them and looked after their emotional state, that is the number one factor that protects a child from a dysfunctional home, that protects them from an abusive home or a chaotic home. In my case, my mother's Aussie Irish revert, and my mother had really beautiful, we had a really beautiful upbringing in regards to my mother. She was extremely emotionally attuned to us. I had quite a secure attachment to my mother. And so my mum was the protective factor. She was the one that would help us to unpack my father's behavior quite young, when he would do violent acts, or he would do behavior that wasn't healthy at all. So she was able to process it with us at a young age. And so we got the belief that it's not my fault, because what children do, because they don't have the critical thinking skills before the age of 10, they start to default to self-blame. They think, well, Baba's really upset, or Dad's really upset, or Mum's really acting in this way. There must be something wrong with me. So they internalize then a low self-esteem or self-worth. So what the studies have consistently found, that the most resilient factor in raising children in homes where one parent may be dysfunctional, one parent may be having behaviors, and we in a society live where many people have addictions, many people have anger management issues. They have their own traumas that they have not healed from. They may be wounded in that way, and so your early relationships play an important role in how you see yourself, and how your attachment style in your childhood has a lifelong experience. The good thing about the most beautiful thing is that you can become an adult and learn, then relearn, and learn even if you weren't given the ingredients or what you needed in that healthy foundation. But for those children that did grow up in that home, and if there was someone that believed in them, most basic need of a child, a sense of belonging, a sense of, I believe in you, that a sense of love, that really has a big a protective factor in these cases. And
That is so
those
important what you
relational,
said, actually, Khadija.
yeah,
Sorry to disrupt you there. It's
no
just
problem.
because we have so many couples nowadays that they are so worried in their own sort of relationship because it's not secure. And it gives a little bit of
Yes,
hope knowing that even if they can't control it, it doesn't have to always, resolve in divorce. And sometimes it's not
yes,
possible for certain people to do that. And maybe it's not the right issue and they need more time. But in that time of healing or developing themselves, they're still going
yes,
through parent, going through a lot of,
yeah,
issues. So it gives you
yeah,
hope that if there's one at least stable parent that's giving that love,
yes,
showing and giving the attention, I think that's really
yes,
important to raise, which I'm glad you did. And
yeah.
also
And that's why I'm
that,
so passionate about women, mothers, like doing the inner work, learning self-regulation, learning to heal their past, because they'll mirror that. And I had so many experiences where they'll say, oh, my husband started to mirror my behavior. My husband started to, shift, because she shifted in that relationship. She was more healthy in her responses, how she dealt with conflict, how she dealt with that dynamic. She started to look after herself instead of being survival, burnout, overwhelmed. So then she was giving more of her, not her depletion to her family. She was giving her healthy emotional response to her children and to herself. So it's definitely a safeguarding aspect to it.
absolutely, absolutely. So what are some of the behaviors that adults do that is rooted in their childhood wounds or just childhood in general?
If I mean, all our patterns of behaviors and messages that we received are rooted in our childhood. But if you grew up in a home where there was a lot of dysfunctional elements, there are certain patterns of behavior that seem to come out quite consistently, and beliefs. Number one would be a behavior or belief. I start with the belief because the behavior kind of exhibits as low self-esteem or unworthiness, or would be um, just lost my train of thought. Um,
You
not
said,
believing they're good enough. Not believing
okay.
they're good enough. So another one would be hyper independent patterns. So as a child, they learned that sometimes their needs are not met. So they learned to be hyper independent. So another pattern would be linking their worthiness to their productivity. This is quite common. So if they're not productive, they're not contributing, they feel unworthy. And it should never be that way. You're attributing your your outer behavior isn't a definition of your worthiness of who you are. You're already worthy because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you worthy. Another one would be patterns like how they deal with conflict or reaction. They might go into an avoidance pattern where they shut down and avoid. They don't want to deal with things, so they minimize the damage. And it was a safety mechanism from childhood because you couldn't just run away. So there are certain patterns that either avoid or numb. You want to escape, ignore, run away. There's certain patterns that, and what happens is it impacts the connection then to your children. It impacts the connection to the people around you. So there's some of the patterns. I talked about perfectionism.
Some children, Khadija, find it very difficult, regardless of how caring the parent is, to express themselves, sometimes personality or, the fact that they still need time. So what advice can you give a parent to build a connection? And if they are going through trauma from, say, one other parent and not themselves, what advice would you give the sort of like functioning parent for their child to sort of like, open up, or should they open up? And are there different stages in that? Because obviously when they're very young, and when they become a little bit sort of like, teenagers or up to before even teenagers, is there a difference in the way in which you need to treat them and connect with them so that they can express themselves and you understand? And then what do you do with that either? Because a lot of parents are equipped with that. They might
exactly.
I don't want to listen to you because I don't know what I'm going to do with that information.
Yeah. And that's what the thing about intergenerational cycles that are passed on from grandmother to mother to daughter, or, father to grandfather to father, to these patterns and cycles are behaviors, right? And we show up in those cycles and patterns. So building a child that is more emotionally healthy, like definitely when you talk about child development is so important, because how you would deal with a 4-year-old is very different to how you would deal with a 10-year-old or 14, just because of their emotional, mental, physical development. So both from Islamic psychology and both from a child development, the 0 to 7 is the most age that is just all about building connection with that child. So the two main aspects that build connection from 0 to 7 is actually play. Play drives the brain. Play is so important, yet it's underused. So get those kids away from screens, play, just so enjoying play. And the other thing that makes the brain thrive, particularly from 0 to 7, is connection. It's those emotional cues. It's the safety cues, the touch, you're sending a message of safety to your child through how you interact with them. Then from 7 to 14, which, this is the stages even is from Islamic psychology, is a teaching and mentoring stage. So this age would be, you're more guiding your child, you're teaching them, you're talking to them, you're listening to them. You're sending the message, I hear you, I see you. A lot of adults have issues in their conversations because their childhood wound was not being seen or heard, or they feel rejection when what their opinion is not validated. And that can come a lot to do with their subconscious memory in their childhood experience of not being seen and heard. And then from about 14 onwards, we've got now a teenage brain. They are lots of development, lots of hormones, and that is more a friendship. Well, what a lot of parents do is they go into power struggle and conflict with that older age. This is when you build a friendship with that child from 14 onwards. You're guiding them still, but you want them to come back to you. You want to be their rock, that they come back and listen to you. To establish these stages, you have to know yourself. You have to know how your behavior is destructive or healthy towards your children or the people around you. One of the biggest things that builds really innate, resilient children is that co-regulation. Most people weren't taught how to co-regulate.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's so much information. I'm just like literally writing notes and taking notes. And anyone that is watching, please do rewind, take notes, because this is really vital, valuable information that we need to really sort of take on board, because it is our future. And, when we're bringing up children, it's not the norm as we think nowadays, especially with so much that is being, thrown at us, whether it's in the West or just generally in life. And we need to be a little bit more aware. And I always say that parenting is a skill. So take it as a skill. It's not just about having so many kids, so many boys and girls, and, making your family happy because you've just got a child. You need to now be geared up for it, because, at the end of the day, you are building society and units. It starts with your home. We are coming on to another break, but I just also want to reassure anyone that whoever's watching, if you're triggered, please do contact BritishMuslim.tv/support. Also, we are talking about information here that, at the end of the day, is only for your benefit, to help you so that you can grow in your family, that you can actually have that support, knowing that if there are issues, we need to look within, but at the same time, it does come from our past, our parents, child upbringing, environment. There's a lot of factors here, and obviously there's case-by-case studies, but we are highlighting the general norms. Now, please do stay with me, as we are going to come back, and after our second break. It's going by so quickly, but I have so much more questions for Khadija. Do join us, as we will be having the second part of the show in a few moments. Please don't go away and stay tuned, and we will see you very, very shortly. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in, and everyone that is commenting or giving any of your sort of like queries. We do appreciate it. The fact that you're streaming in and supporting, it really means a lot to us. And also we have our lovely guest Khadija, all the way from Australia, who is giving us some really, really gems tonight when it comes to understanding our family. Now, the million-dollar question, Khadija. What is a dysfunctional family? Let's describe this so that hopefully we can pinpoint our sort of surroundings, environment, and take some notes so that we can actually do some inner work.
Yeah, definitely. So a dysfunctional family, I mean, any family, you had to learn your blueprint of how you respond emotionally, the way that you show up in relationships. In a dysfunctional family, there are certain things, certain aspects of the family that feel chaotic, that don't feel safe emotionally. And relationships can be unhealthy. So there could be abusive elements, there could be elements that are toxic or unhealthy. A child may be left to feel not heard, not supported, not loved. There may be some level of neglect. There may be some emotional abuse. There might be some psychological, physical, sexual, mental abuse. There's different elements. So every family is different, and some may have more level of toxicity, and others may have a more not be so, more functioning, more healthy. So one of the main signs of a dysfunctional family, we look at the autonomy and freedom of the family members. Do they have their freedoms restricted? Is there like financial abuse? The physical and emotional safety. Are the people in that family unit emotionally and physically safe? Are they able to express their opinions? Belonging and connection. When we look at belonging and connection, is it destructive? Is it unhealthy? Is rupture and repair done? So when I say about rupture and repair, it's like a bridge, right? When any relationship, and then when there's a rupture, it's like the bridge is broken and we need to repair. So in healthy families, that will be done maybe through conversation, through loving touch, when there has been that bridge broken. But in dysfunctional families, usually the repair work has not been done. It may go to silent treatment, or it might go to some patterns of behavior that don't actually build the connection over time. The ability to rely on your caregivers, if that was taken away, or they were dealing with depression, anxiety, drug addiction, mental health issues, you may have grown up quite feeling alone as a child. You didn't have that ability to feel completely that you could rely on the caregivers in your life. Speaking your opinion is actually quite an interesting one in dysfunctional families. It doesn't feel safe to do that. The biggest thing about dysfunctional homes is that the stress levels are always higher. So the cortisol levels of the children are growing up. You can almost feel the tension in the home because there's a lot of conflict, because there is that sense as a child that I have to be hyper vigilant because things don't seem safe. That stress level. So you're constantly in a stress state. And so that affects the body, it affects the mind. Not prioritizing your own needs can also come from childhood dysfunctional behavior, because your first blueprint of how you grew up, especially for us females, is our mother. We follow our feminine nature first is the blueprint of our mother. If the mother was self-neglecting, if she was self-abandoning her needs, if she was too busy dealing with her husband's issues, then, or she was falling into depression or anxiety, that's going to impact the messages that you received about women. And likewise, men, boys look up to their father. And so their first blueprint of how a male role model is their father. And so if their father's doing things that are unhealthy, or their father is showing up and dealing in his emotions in an unhealthy way, or also women, that's their first blueprint. And so it has a huge lifelong effect until you actually address it. This is so important. That's why we address our past issues, because even those of you who grew up with not much, quite a good childhood, will still carry certain beliefs or messages that may not be healthy to pass on to your children or to your grandchildren. So the key thing is, in dysfunctional family, there's patterns of behavior in how you respond that don't serve you now as an adult, and now it serves you to work on that mental well-being so that you can show up more healthy. You have that innate well-being. You start to prioritize your own healing and growth, so you're actually able then to pass it on to others in your family.
Listening to you, Khadija, is so refreshing. But at the same time, what came up for me is that when we're speaking like this, and we are talking to a majority of Muslim community, and
Yeah,
unfortunately, from my own experience having clients, what you're saying and what you're highlighting, unfortunately, not because of the faith, but because of the culture, it is so normal to just make it normal for all the things that, some of the things even that you've highlighted. And I'm not even talking
yeah,
about the cases. I'm talking about being
yeah,
silent, not speaking up, not doing this because it's like regarded as respect. You can't even,
yeah,
talk about how you're feeling, especially if it's negative
yeah,
to an elderly person.
yeah,
So why is it so important for us to discuss mental health in our Muslim communities? Because our cultures clash when it comes to the norms of psychology. And then at the
yeah,
same time, psychology is seen sometimes as a Western kind of like idea, when actually it is also, in the Quran in a lot of ways, but it's just not highlighted
yeah,
as science, right? But the psychology
yeah,
is like
exactly.
me and
Yeah.
you studying it, we realize this is all Islamic, but people don't want to say that
Exactly.
because it takes away
Everything
from
healthy
culture.
bound, our
Yeah,
deen, our Islam is literally a system. A healthy boundaries are established in Islam. You limit setting is established in Islam. Every aspect of what we talk about, how the Prophet Muhammad SAW lived his life, how he dealt with his family members. He never hit children. He never, so many things that we do today never was done during the Prophet and Sahaba time.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
again, I hope that anyone's listening, that we do understand that there is definitely a fine line as much as we can enjoy culture, but please be aware of some of the dysfunctional patterns in your home, which is actually not going to serve you or your children, and it is definitely going to affect you emotionally, psychologically and physiologically as well. Because like you said, it affects your body as well when it comes to the neurotransmitters and your chemicals,
Yes,
your stress levels and things like
yes.
that. I
And
mean,
Fahima, I think the big, yeah, go on.
no, it's fine. We talk about attachments, but I'm sure, as children, we are
Yeah.
going to be attached. Now, what is a healthy attachment relationship?
Okay, so healthy attachment is established in childhood. But the great thing about attachment is that if you didn't have a healthy attachment in childhood, then as an adult, this can be built in healthy relationships. I really
Mhm.
believe in the work that I do. You either heal in healthy relationships, or you will be more traumatized in relationships that are unhealthy. So signs of a healthy relationship in a child would be that the parent is more available and consistent in meeting their emotional needs. But particularly when we look at what is healthy in adult relationships, because your childhood affects your adult dynamics. They affect your adult dynamics that you're experiencing, the relationships that you have with other people are actually very rooted in your childhood responses, beliefs, values. So it's part of a secure, healthy adult relationships that is rooted from child is having secure, lasting relationships. Those relationships feel emotionally safe. Um, Tend to have more good self-esteem. Children that grew up with at least one parent that they had a good, secure attachment with usually have higher levels of self-worth and self-esteem. They seek out social support, or they seek out help when they need it.
Mhm.
Children that grew up in homes that there was like a message when there's a lot of dysfunctional behavior that I need to not have needs. I need to protect myself or play small or keep myself like hidden or and it's a safety mechanism, because if
Yeah.
they maybe had needs or they express that, they could get in trouble for that. They might get a negative reaction to that, right? Or have an opinion about something. A lot of the time, an secure relationship, the parent or the adults seek win-win solutions. They seek to repair that relationship when there's rupture, when there is a conflict. Conflicts are in healthy and unhealthy relationships. It's how we respond to those conflicts
Yes.
in those relationships. And care in general, if you had at least one caregiver. When I say caregiver, it doesn't necessarily have to be a parent. You could have an awesome step parent. You could have
Mhm.
had a grandmother. But in general, those of you who are mothers and you're listening, a caregiver that is more attentive, that's more sends the message, I hear you, I see you. That is really important for children, because then they build this perception of themselves. And this is the biggest thing with dysfunctional family upbringings. They don't have a positive perception of themselves, because children don't know any better. Their father
Yeah.
comes home and he's hangry and he hits them and he's screaming and shouting. That child just thinks, they don't understand that he's angry because his boss has told him off and he's about to lose his job. They just think, children just go to self-blame, to default, to keep themselves safe. It's like, oh, there must be something wrong with me.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's learned in healthy relationships. It's more emotional safety. There's a lot more level of emotional safety, and boundary setting is allowed. I'm allowed to have that. What really healthy boundaries is that loving space between you and me that looks after the space of your autonomy and my autonomy to connect to each other.
I hear a lot of stories of women, especially as well, when they are looking for a spouse, and
Yes.
they are trying to escape, their family situation, or they
Yes.
just want to fulfill what they already had. Like a lot of people, they say, like, I've had many people come to me saying that, I've had a loving family, so I need that. I mean, at the end of the day, as much whether you come from trauma or whether you come from a healthy family, you need to be whole on your own and you need to figure it out for yourself. But when you're looking for something similar or something opposite to what was not right, there is a problem. And I think the reason why we are having so many issues in relationships now, many, many reasons, but I think one of those, like you said, and that's why we're discussing this, is because of that dysfunctional family cycle. So what would you
Yes.
advise young people or anyone who's deciding to be married? Well, I'll come back to you on that question because we're going on to a break, but for you to think about, and anyone even who's out there, like we want relationships, we want healthy relationships. We think we want to either
Yeah.
we want to recreate what our families already have shown us. And we need
Yeah.
to get advice with regards to choosing a spouse. And how do we even choose that? I mean, do we look at ourselves first? And at the same time, do we have to analyze them? There's no such thing even as like premarital counseling coaching as much that any Muslim
Mm.
family would or couple go to. I give that personally myself. And I've seen a lot of young couples come to me and, they're actually taking that on board because they understand the psychology of moving forward and not wanting it to go. So I'd like to hear some of your thoughts when we come back from the break. I also want to hear what people are thinking about premarital courses with regards to going into something, and a lot of us think that why, go to a problem when it isn't there, but it's not about that at all. And we're going to come back and discuss this in much more detail when we have our final break. But please do stay tuned as we are going to have this question answered by Khadija. And inshallah, we hope to have you join us in a few moments. Please don't go away as we will be back after this very short break. Take care. Salam. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the final part of Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV. I can't believe how quick it's gone, and I don't even think I'm going to go through all the questions that I have for you because there's so much to discuss. I could really do a series with you easily, but I know that we've really touched on really important aspects of this kind of topic. And I think that a lot of people will have a lot of takeaways from, listening to this episode. So again, if you just joined us, please rewind, go back, and again, have any of your say. We've still got another part of the show to go to. And if you want to contact us, please do. Now, before the break, Khadija, I was asking you about, deciding as to choosing your spouse, because obviously what we've discussed right here is not just for information for you to just ignore.
Yeah.
It's to actually put into action when you're looking
Yes.
for your potential partner.
Yes.
How do you go
Yes.
about that? What's your advice to couples, whether it's the first time or even second time round? What is it? Because people also make the same mistakes over and over again. They think about the
Yes.
finance, where they're going to live.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
what about their nervous system? How they handle
Exactly.
it? What state is that in? No one talks about
Yeah.
that. So what is your advice?
Yes. And yet that's the fundamental, that's the foundation. You're living with someone 24/7. So you're going to mirror their nervous system. You're going to their nervous system. We talk about nervous system, how they deal with emotions, how they get triggered, how they their flight fight response, how that has an impact, and you will naturally mirror that another person's nervous system, especially when you live in close contact with them. So whether they're secure or unsecure has a big impact. I really wish this was taught more. We did a healthy beginnings. I did it with my husband, I think 2 years ago in my city. We did a healthy beginnings workshop. So we had all these young people, probably from about 18, helping them to understand what is it you want to attract in a partner that is more emotionally healthy. We all hear about red flags. We all
Mhm.
hear like this is a red flag, but we don't understand enough green flags, the
Yes.
healthy parts. What are the things that make a relationship really healthy? And I think because sometimes a lot of people weren't modeled that, it's so important that they learn that. If not, their blueprint is already seeped in a dysfunctional um, patterns, but not only dysfunctional patterns, the views you have of the opposite
Mhm.
sex comes from your family of origin. So what I experience a lot in my work is I work with a lot of women who have a lot of negative views about men. And so they could be projecting their wounding onto men. And I'm sure the same thing happens with men when they've had maybe a motherhood wound, where they had maybe a critical mother and they had a bad relationship with their mother. They might then show up in their adult relationships as emotionally unavailable, for example. So it's so important to understand what is healthy. And what you said, Fahima, before the break was, do you work on yourself first? Yeah, you have to be consciously aware of your own behavior patterns. Because what's really interesting as humans, right? When somebody has a different thought to us or has a different belief, we naturally as humans, because our brains are wired to connect, if we don't feel we feel that they're different to us, we can learn to just disconnect and be like, no, they're a threat just because they
Yeah.
have a different opinion or belief. But in marriages, you are going to have different opinions and beliefs about things. That doesn't necessarily make it unhealthy. A healthy marriage may have different beliefs and values, but being able to embrace that, because remember, interpretation is
Mhm.
probably the biggest discourse.
Mhm.
It causes most of discourse or traumas, or causes a lot of misunderstandings, is how we interpret an experience. And that is rooted in thought. That's rooted in our own personal map of the world, of how we see the world. So there are two aspects of here. Understanding what healthy dynamics are in a marriage and looking for people that have signs of that, but also your own perception, your own biases. We interpret and perceive the world so differently based on our childhood, our thoughts. So somebody that's questioning some of what you've inherited as a child, the blueprint you've inherited, because what happens is, and like you said, people sometimes remarry and then they marry again.
Mhm.
Before I went into my second marriage, which I've been alhamdulillah married 7 years now, I really was much more aware of what is healthy. And I also was working on myself. So the vibration was very different. The way I was
Yes.
showing up was very different. So when you're aware of yourself and what you know is healthy, I knew exactly I wanted a trustworthy person. I wanted an honest person. The things that are rooted in, these are more important than the $20,000 wedding. So these things are
Absolutely.
the things that's going to make that marriage last, inshallah, in a healthy way.
Well, you know what? I don't want to wait till the end because you know what? Your work is so valuable. I want to ask you now, before we actually go into even the next question, is how do people reach you? Because obviously you help so many people, and if anyone's that's watching right now, they want some more help, they want some insights, or just
Yeah.
follow your content. To be honest, give us some, details, please, because I think that's really important. I don't want to wait till the
Yeah,
end.
you can. No
Forget.
problem. You can jump onto Instagram or Facebook with my name. Just pop my name in Khadija Al Qador and you'll be able to find me on Instagram or Facebook. Particularly work with Muslim mothers. So building their secure attachment, being able to build a more emotionally healthy in themselves so they can pass that to their children. And break those intergenerational patterns. A lot of what I'm talking about today is in my book that I'll be releasing in December, inshallah. So I talk about dysfunctional, especially if those of you grew up in dysfunctional homes or have childhood wounds or have some childhood traumas. I've written a whole book on healing and growth from there. So that
Amazing.
inshallah will be released end of this year.
Amazing. So yeah, please do go follow, because I certainly am waiting for that book to come out. I can't wait for it. And congratulations
Thank
on
you very
that too. Now,
much.
when it comes to someone, let's say they are working on themselves, but can you sort of give some tips on self-regulation if they are
Yeah,
triggered by maybe being having anger or anything or upset? What kind of
yes.
tips do you give?
Um, Safety isn't found in people. Like safety, you first have to have some level of emotional safety. Your perception of the world is going to have a big impact. So understanding your thoughts is number one in any reaction. Challenge yourself to kind of slow down when you'd normally get angry or upset, and really understand, what am I actually being triggered here? One of the most interesting things about triggers when you're getting very angry, upset, lashing out, is you think you are reacting to the present moment, but that's not the case. You're actually reacting to a past memory, something from the past that's subconscious, that's then re-triggering you, reminding you, that then comes back into the present moment. That's how the brain is wired. The brain almost looks for something that's happened in the past. This reminds it. For example, your child drops a cup and you have a reaction, and that could be because when you were a child, you weren't allowed to make mistakes. You will get in big trouble if you made a mistake. So that there's always a subconscious aspect. So when you think about what is happening in the present moment, and obviously you can't do it in that present moment, especially if you're going to go 0 to 100, but self-regulation is allowing the pause and practicing the pause of what is actually going on for me in this moment. Am I offended by what my husband said? Or is this triggering my wound of abandonment when my opinion is not validated? Am I upset or angry that my wife hasn't cooked me a meal when I got home? But is that actually triggering that part of me that my love language of wanting to be served? Like I want to, that's my love language. I feel good when someone serves something for me. And when she doesn't do that, I feel a sense of rejection. There's
Mm.
always something deeper going on in that moment. When you can practice the pause, and this is part of our deen, that sabr is so, I can't emphasize how many things, that patience. And if you don't have the patience in that moment, being able to just walk away, take a few breaths, because usually in a stress response, so you're not you're an emotional part of your brain, and just being able to, okay, what's going on for me? Number one tool that's so important in self-regulation is labeling the emotion at that time. If you can tell yourself, okay, Khadija, what's going on for you? Okay, you're frustrated. Okay, why are you frustrated? I'm checking in. What's my frustration? By validating the emotion that I'm experiencing in that moment, it helps my brain to come back onto focus instead of staying in the emotional part of the brain.
Those are really, really useful tips. And I do sort of like second that. It's really important. Understanding yourself and actually being accountable first. Because again,
Yes.
when we feel something, we sort of say, you made me feel like this, instead of saying, I feel like this, and let's unravel.
Yes.
I think that is so
Yes.
important to do as well. It also helps your partner so that they don't automatically go on the defense or feel attacked. And at the
Yes.
same time, you
Yes.
are holding yourself accountable for feeling that way, because you're not giving the other person that power either. So I think, you know what?
Yes.
You can be in control then, regardless of your environment, because a lot of us, we do want to blame and play victim. And then we,
Yeah. Oh, victim
you
is
know,
big. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly, the sort of
Yeah.
like, the triangle, kind of drama
Yes.
triangle that we are, in
Yeah.
psychology.
It's a cycle. They say
Yeah,
breaking the cycle because it's
breaking
a
the
cycle. Some
cycle.
people are addicted to chaos. They're addicted to that stress hormone
Yes,
response. Yeah.
absolutely. Yes, yes, definitely. It's not easy to break, but it is possible. And even if you come from trauma, what I loved that you've said is that regardless of your trauma or one parent going through it, you can overcome. Even as an adult, you can do that.
Yeah.
Now we've come to the end
Yes.
of the show. Just give us like a minute of your time, because I want you to end. And I just want to say thank you again for being with us today. It's been absolutely wonderful. But a key takeaway for a number one thriving, healthy relationship. Take it away, Khadija.
Okay. A key takeaway for a thriving, healthy relationship is working on your own triggers. I can't emphasize, you live in your own thought pattern. You can't change the blueprint of how you see the world and you perceive things if you don't actually acknowledge and understand what's going on unconsciously. And there's so much unconscious behavior that not consciously aware. And I see this in coaching all the time. And a Muslim mother will be like, oh, I didn't realize that was what I was actually thinking. And so they may have had an assumption, or they may be projecting onto their child. When I say projecting, they're having some negative. So having that, really understanding who you are and understanding your behavior helps so much, because, once you know yourself, you're going to be less reactive. When someone says something that is normally would offend you, you're not going to get offended because you know yourself. You already have a perception of yourself, of a level of vibration of self-love and self-worthiness as an act of worship, because Allah does not want us to oppress ourselves. Allah doesn't want us to sit in self-criticism.
Absolutely not.
And negative talk.
Absolutely not. Khadija, you've been an amazing guest tonight. I'm so pleased to have you, and thank you so much for your time. I just want to say that inshallah you continue with your work and stay blessed. And I do urge anyone who's watching now or in the future, please do take notes and do follow Khadija. Thank you so much for tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you get some sleep and enjoy the rest of your day. I also want to thank everyone that's been watching an amazing episode with my lovely guest, and I do appreciate you tuning in every week. And we will be back next week with another episode, inshallah, at an earlier time, because it's coming up towards Eid. Please do join us at 6 p.m. We will be with you with another topic and episode. I really want to wish you a very, very amazing night. Inshallah, we will see you next week. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.